Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the largest gathering of highway safety professionals in the United States, the Lifesavers 2022 conference in Chicago. It is my pleasure at this time to welcome your Lifesavers Board Chair, John Yulcheski.
Good morning. Welcome to Lifesavers. After 3 years of not being together, it's great to be together again, and we are live. Before we get started, I want to share a few important safety reminders. Take a moment, look around the exits on the side and in the back, and in the case of an emergency, you can follow the people in the front because they're going to be running in the back. They're going to be running faster than you are probably, so just follow the herd. Also, a good reminder, if you're staying in the hotel, make sure that you know where your emergency exits are. A lot of people don't think about that and don't look behind the door of their room, but it's a good 2-minute kind of drill to familiarize yourself with the hotel and with your place. And of course, if you see something suspicious, say something. And we are fortunate, we have a lot of folks from Illinois State Police and the Illinois Department of Transportation, and you will see them out around, and they'll be happy to take note of anything that you might see and help us look into it. Now let's officially kick off the 40th. This is the 40th conference. How about that? 40th Lifesavers Conference with the presentation of our nation's colors from the Illinois State Police Honor Guard. Please welcome Tyrone White, Jose Flores, Chris Carabin, Randall Wells, and Arcadius Wozniak as they present the colors. Gentlemen.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight of the land, what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you to the Illinois State Police Honor Guard and the singing by Special Agent John Paul Olivito. Thank you so much for your service. You know, seeing the law enforcement folks in the room is always a thrill for me. And I think this is a good moment to recognize all the current and former law enforcement officers. Would you please stand and be recognized? Thank you. Thank you so much for your service and protecting us all every day. There's another group that's really always been an important part of Lifesavers, and I'm going to talk more about them in a minute. But first, how many child passenger safety technicians and instructors do we have in the room today? Would you stand, please? Law enforcement, child passenger safety have been key parts of this conference over the entire 40 years, and I'm going to talk more about both of them in a little bit. But first, let's talk about some special people in the world of child passenger safety. I'd like to direct your attention to the boards and recognize the 2022 National Child Passenger Safety Award winners as recognized by the National Child Passenger Safety Board. Marilyn Morris of Utah. Marilyn, are you here? Stand up. Marilyn is the National Child Passenger Safety Technician of the Year. She's recognized for her work in developing a HIPAA-compliant virtual car seat safety check program for Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City, Utah. Thank you so much, Marilyn. Jackie Stackhouse of New Jersey. Jackie is the National Child Passenger Safety Instructor of the Year. She has recognized for her efforts over the last 16 years supporting child passenger safety across New Jersey, educating caregivers and technicians. Thank you so much, Jackie. The Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community Child Passenger Safety Team from Arizona. Are any of you here? Well, this team is the Safety Team of the Year, the Child Passenger Safety Team of the Year. Led by Monty Yazzie, they stay committed to their motto that every child leaves an interaction safer than when they arrived, while providing caregiver education at over 350 appointments and 15 car safety seat checks events in 2021. Please join me in congratulating all of the National CPS Award winners, honorees. And for those attendees who are currently child passenger safety technicians, thank you for all you do every day to save the lives of the youngest and most vulnerable in our society. Thank you for all you do. The Lifesavers Conference has a lot of partners, a lot of important folks, and the sponsors. As a nonprofit entity, the sponsors are critical to us. These businesses, nonprofit organizations, are really vital for their support and commitment of this conference. And please join me now in giving them a welcome round of applause. You know, as a resident of this great city of Chicago, I have to tell you that I hope you will, even though it might be a little cold outside at night, I hope you will enjoy all this city has to offer. And here to officially welcome us to the great city of Chicago is our governor, the Honorable J.B. Pritzker. Governor Pritzker was sworn in as the 43rd governor of Illinois in 2019, and he's accomplished already one of the most ambitious and consequential legislative agendas, including bipartisan passage for Rebuild Illinois, the largest investment in state history to upgrade the state's roads, bridges, rail, broadband, and universities. Now a message from Governor Pritzker.
Hello, this is Governor J.B. Pritzker. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2022 Lifesavers Conference, celebrating its 40th anniversary right here in Chicago. As the transportation and supply chain hub for the nation, Illinois understands the importance of safe roads and highways for companies and families alike. One of my first priorities as governor was to invest in our state's infrastructure, and we did. My bipartisan-backed Rebuild Illinois is the largest infrastructure investment ever in the history of our state. In just its first 2.5 years, we've repaired and replaced over 3,500 miles of road and repaired nearly 350 bridges. Thanks to the excellent team at the Illinois Department of Transportation and highly skilled laborers across the state, we're making Illinois safer for everyone. There's no better state to host the largest highway safety meeting in America. Of course, our work can only be done with the right kind of research. So I want to thank you for all the work you do to continuously innovate and expand the world of highway safety research. You're saving lives. Once again, welcome to Illinois and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Governor. The Illinois Department of Transportation has really been a very important partner in this conference, and you're going to see folks with the Illinois DOT supporting various aspects of this conference throughout the next few days. I'd like now to introduce the Secretary of the Illinois Department of Transportation, Omar Osman. Mr. Osman was appointed Secretary by the Governor in 2019, and his appointment as Secretary reflects the 3 decades of experience that he has had in the state and in the Illinois Department of Transportation. A native of Sudan, he came to the United States to study civil engineering and also earned a master's degree in civil engineering at Bradley University in Peoria. Please welcome Illinois Department of Transportation Secretary, Mr. Omar Osman.
Good morning. So our governor is a good guy, and I'll tell you why. He gave me a lot of money. So good morning once again, and it is an absolute honor to welcome you to this year's Lifesaver Conference. I'm especially appreciative since we all have not been able to meet like this face-to-face since 2019. This is the 5th time Illinois has served as your host, and I could not be prouder to welcome you back. The main reason, the purpose and work of Lifesavers is mission critical to everything we do in our industry. Safety is at the core of what we all believe in as transportation professionals. But a gathering of leaders like this also gives me an opportunity to brag about the work we are doing at the Illinois Department of Transportation, and I'm actually going to brag. But thanks to the leadership and the vision of the governor whom you just heard from, and actually the Illinois General Assembly, we are continuing to make historic investment in transportation up and down the state. The governor's Rebuild Illinois is the largest ever in our history, identifying $33.2 billion to invest in transportation over 6 years. After years of disinvestment and lack of sustained funding, Rebuild Illinois put us back in the business of building and maintaining a premier transportation network that creates jobs, supports quality of life, and yes, improves safety for all users. Allow me to share with you a few numbers from Rebuild Illinois. A total of $25.3 billion in combined state, federal, and local funding for roads and bridges throughout the state. A $4.5 billion will be used to improve transit. A $1.1 billion has been set aside for various rail projects. And we are putting close to $600 million toward our aeronautics sector. With Rebuild Illinois, we are in a great position to capitalize on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the transformational piece of legislation passed in Washington just recently. None of this, of course, matters. None of it matters if we are not building and supporting a safe, multimodal system. At IDOT, we take safety extremely seriously. It should be, and it is our number one priority. The rise in fatalities over the last couple of years during the pandemic have been swift, stunning, and frankly, quite scary. It cannot continue, and we all have to have a part to play in the solution. The trends the last few years are not working in our favor. Last year, for the 5th year in a row, more than 1,000 people died on our highways in Illinois, according to our provisional data. We saw the most death on our system that we have seen in close to 15 years, mirroring a trend that is happening nationwide. That should deeply concern all of us and push us into action. We need to continue steering our employees and industry partners to consider a safe system approach from planning project all the way to maintaining our system. When someone makes a mistake or bad choice while driving, we do not want that to be a result of a loss of life. At IDOT, we have renewed our safety focus to put resources where they will make the greatest impact. We intend to have a multimodal or multifaceted approach based on data to tackle infrastructure users and behavioral safety concerns. The only acceptable goal for traffic-related fatalities for any of us is 0. Conferences like Lifesavers engages all stakeholders to help us achieve that critical mission. There are many areas that needs to be addressed. We still have way too many work zone fatalities, as well as death happening because of wrong-way drivers. Seatbelt usages rate have improved, but nearly 40% of our fatalities are unbuckled. We need to get the usage rate to 100%. Pedestrian fatalities, especially pedestrian fatalities, continues to climb here in Illinois and across the nation. We have been fortunate, though, in Illinois to have a governor and a General Assembly that supports laws to strengthen our safety in our state. However, there is more we can and we must do. Conferences like, once again, Lifesavers are part of a solution. Every day in this field of ours is critical. We are saving lives. Nothing is more important. You in this room are not only our partners, but our best chance to share ideas and proven methods to combat these issues. Over the next couple of days, I urge you to take advantage of the opportunity in front of you. Ask questions, talk to each other, exchange ideas and best practices, build relationships, soak up the information, and learn. But before I conclude, I would like to thank the Lifesavers Board and the Lifesavers Planning Committee for hosting this great conference, and also my team at the Bureau of Safety Program and Engineering and the Office of Communication for their hard work. Thank you for what you do. And with that, I would like to thank you. Thank you, and have a great conference. Thank you. And now, it is my honor to introduce Illinois State Police Colonel Margaret McGrill. A 24-year veteran of the Illinois State Police, Colonel McGrill serves as the first female colonel of the Division of Patrol. In this role, Colonel McGrill oversees both Support Services Command and Patrol Operations Command, which consists of 21 strategically situated districts statewide to provide comprehensive law enforcement services to the public as well as to fellow law enforcement agencies. So, ladies and gentlemen, Colonel McGrill.
Good morning. My name is Colonel Margaret McGrill, Deputy Director for the Division of Patrol, and I'm honored to welcome you to this year's Lifesavers Conference. Having experienced the tragedies of vehicle crashes throughout our lives, whether it be personal experience or close friends or family, it is easy to understand how important it is to stop these tragedies before they occur. While looking at the list of attendees, I was amazed to see we have representatives from across the country, including law enforcement, child safety advocates, transportation planners and engineers, highway safety officials, victim advocates, auto and insurance agents, students, first responders, and many more accomplished professionals. Many like to say our roadways, but in truth, it is dedicated professionals like you who truly take figurative ownership of the roads and dedicate your lives to making them safer for everyone. We share in this responsibility and are proud to partner with you as we lead the charge toward lowering fatalities and personal injury crashes. Our commitment is demonstrated by the daily actions of the men and women of the ISP. It is woven into our very fabric. For us, they are the fatal four choices being made by drivers every day. They are driving under the influence, speeding, failure to wear seatbelt, and distracted driving. We will continue to aggressively enforce the laws surrounding these poor choices, knowing we have the support of professionals like you. This focus is not only for the motoring public's safety, but for our own. Unfortunately, we in the Illinois State Police have felt this pain over the last several years. To emphasize the importance of your attendance at this conference, I would like to ask for a moment to recognize our recently fallen. Trooper Christopher Lambert, end of watch, January 12th, 2019. Trooper Brooke Jones Story, end of watch, March 28th, 2019. Trooper Gerald Ellis, end of watch, March 30th, 2019. Trooper Nicholas Hopkins, end of watch, August 23rd, 2019. Senior Master Trooper Todd Hannikin, end of watch, March 25th, 2021. Now, I would like to dedicate a moment of silence for those who have tragically lost family members on our roadways across the country. Thank you. The Illinois State Police have remained focused on aggressive enforcement of Illinois Scott's Law. Most of you know it as the Move Over Law. It is fitting we highlight this law here in Chicago, as it was named after Chicago Fire Lieutenant Scott Gillen, who was struck and killed by a DUI driver while assisting on a Bishop Ford crash on December 23rd, 2000. The Illinois State Police also lost troopers Christopher Lambert and Brooke Jones Story to this violation in 2019. More recently, on February 15th, 2021, Trooper Brian Frank was seriously injured in a crash involving a Scott's Law violation. But Brian is strong, and he is still on his path to recovery. Unfortunately, this story and stories like these are all too familiar to us. So thank you to everyone in this room who has helped to put this law on the books throughout the country. Because of you, all 50 states have some form of the Move Over Law. Looking at the national statistics, traffic fatalities are on the rise. Now more than ever, your dedication to traffic safety is critical to our mission of driving towards zero fatalities. I am proud to stand in this room with representatives from across the country from all three fields of the 3 E's of fatality prevention: engineering, enforcement, and education. Your efforts, though often unseen, continue to make a difference. It is fitting that I represent the Illinois State Police as we celebrate our 100th anniversary this year, with our beginning directly tied to the Illinois Department of Transportation and the original 8 Illinois State Police officers with their portable scales, World War I surplus uniforms, and motorcycles patrolling in 1922 to protect hard-surfaced roads from overweight vehicles. That was the beginning of a deep-seated partnership with IDOT to protect Illinois roads and the motoring public. A partnership that clearly continues as there are representatives of both agencies here today. The Illinois State Police has adopted the slogan, "Driving zero fatalities to reality." With networking opportunities throughout this conference, skills learned in the upcoming sessions, and renewed drive by all of you over the next 3 days, I have confidence in you that you will make a difference. One of the highest values of this conference is to recharge your batteries, get you excited and reinvigorated, armed with new ideas gleaned through networking opportunities to solve problems and meet the challenges of safer driving for all moving forward. I want to thank you on behalf of the Illinois State Police Director, Brendan Kelly, in the state of Illinois, for coming to this conference. Have a great conference, and please have a safe trip home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel McGrill, and thank you, Secretary Osmond. I mentioned a couple times probably, this is the 40th Lifesavers Conference. And what I'd like to do now is to kind of go through some of the highlights of the last 40 years. I think there might be some lessons that we can learn in traffic safety about some of the things that have been accomplished by all of us over those last 40 years. Is there anyone here who attended the very first Lifesavers Conference in 1982? Okay. Well, I know that there are some watching online as this. So with none of us having been there, let me tell you a few stories about some of the things that have happened there and since. I'm sorry? Oh, we have one person. Two of them. Sorry I didn't see you. Thank you. So that first conference in 1982, the focus of that conference was primarily on occupant restraints and impaired driving. And here we are 40 years later, and we're still going to be talking about occupant restraints and impaired driving. But let me give you some kind of perspective on some of the things that have happened since that time. You know, the first conference drew 200 people, much to the delight of, let me see here, there we go. Much to the delight of the conference planners because they weren't sure how many people were going to show up. They had never done that before. The principal organizer of that first conference was Phil Hasseltine. He was then director of the Michigan Office of Highway Safety, and that first conference in Detroit inspired the Lifesavers community and the traffic safety community at that time to say, wow, this is a success, maybe we should do it again. And that really is how it started. They initially started as just, let's do it one time, and then they began to think about Lifesavers as an annual conference. The three primary founders were Mr. Hasseltine, Chuck Hurley, who was then with the National Safety Council, and Stephen O'Toole from General Motors. And these three gentlemen led Lifesavers and were in fact the board for the first almost 30 years of the conference, and Mr. Hasseltine was the most recent to retire from the board just a few years ago. They're retired now, but they're probably watching online. So let's give the founders a hand for all they did to start this wonderful thing. From the very beginning of Lifesavers, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has been an active partner. In fact, at that very first conference, the Associate Administrator at that time, George Regal, was a key planner in that first conference. And over the last 40 years, NHTSA support of Lifesavers has been unwavering through 7 presidential administrations. And every Secretary of Transportation and NHTSA leader has supported Lifesavers. Most of them have spoken here. And NHTSA leadership and staff have been a major reason for the success of Lifesavers, and that continues today with a strong partnership. So with the past and current members of the U.S. Department of Transportation and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, please stand for all you're doing all the time to keep Lifesavers the great conference it is. Thank you. And the hard work of the conference has always been done by the Lifesavers Planning Committee, comprised of traffic safety leaders from around the nation and around various aspects of traffic safety. The Planning Committee, they meet monthly, but they work daily on planning the workshops and bringing the hundreds of folks together to plan each of the sessions that you're going to be seeing. This conference is being held at a critical time. The pandemic changed our lives. I don't have to remind you of that, but it really changed traffic safety. It changed our lives in countless ways. We stayed home more. We drove less. In fact, NHTSA reported that American motorists drove 11% fewer miles in 2020 than they did in 2019. 11% fewer miles driven in 1 year. That is the largest single reduction since 1942 in the midst of World War II. Now, you would think that 11% drop in 1 year would have resulted in a commensurate reduction in crashes and fatalities. Well, we did have a 22% decrease in crashes, but we also saw a nearly 7% increase in fatal crashes and a 14% increase in fatalities. Now let that sink in. Miles driven and crashes are down by double digits, but fatalities are up 14%. I mean, the statisticians in the room would tell you how does that happen? It's unheard of. Typically, we have had over many years continuous reductions and nearly annual reductions in fatalities or fatality rates. Traffic fatalities in 2020 increased to the highest number that we've seen on our nation roadways since 2007. So it appears that the trend of increased fatalities is actually continuing. 2021, through the first 9 months, NHTSA reported another 12% increase in fatalities over that high number of 2020. So clearly something's going on. What is going on that we're driving fewer miles, but we have a lot more fatalities? Well, I would tell you that one observation is that risk-taking has spiked. For whatever reason, and we all can probably surmise our own reasons for this, people cooped up in a pandemic are getting out on the road and maybe taking risky behaviors that either they did before or they are becoming more risk takers than they were prior to the pandemic. In the 2020 fatality study, NHTSA reported that 45% of drivers and passenger vehicle fatalities engaged in at least one of these four risky behaviors: speeding, alcohol-impaired driving, or not wearing a seatbelt. 4% were engaged in all of these simultaneously. And I would also contend distractions, especially using cell phones while driving, is also a major contributor. Of course, the problem, of course, is that we cannot actually measure cognitive distraction. We can measure someone that may have been texting during a crash, but we really can't measure the cognitive distraction that they may have had from phone calls, either handheld or hands-free. It's difficult to measure, it's difficult to enforce, but I think it is a key contributor. So all of these risk-taking behaviors have been with us for many years, but now it appears we have more people becoming risk-takers. Did the pandemic cause this change in what I might call a significant change in human behavior? Well, it appears so. When you think about the fact that impaired driving fatalities were up 14%, speed-related fatalities were up 17%, unbelted fatalities were up 14%, all in a year when driving miles were down by double digits. So how do we combat this? I expect over the next few days we're going to have some lively discussions on what's driving the destructive behaviors and how can we turn them around. So I want to provide some historical context as we think about solutions. Road safety professionals throughout history have worked to overcome the challenges, and as we become more technology advanced and our vehicles are better, our streets are more crowded, we have different modes of transportation, motorcycles, bicyclists, our dependency on roadways has grown. A lot of factors are playing into the crisis that we now have. Over the last 40 years, crash fatalities have come down substantially, even though we have millions more drivers and miles driven. And it's been the collaboration of all the folks in this room and millions and thousands of others, partners and stakeholders that have had an impact. But a few of the principal challenges in 1982 are still our challenges today. You know, at that first Lifesavers conference, I mentioned occupant restraints and alcohol impairment were the major issues. Let's start with the protection of children. At that point in time, we had just gotten the very first occupant restraint laws, child passenger safety laws, prior to that first conference. And as I mentioned, the child passenger safety community has been a key part of it. Safety belts. Some of us are old enough to remember when safety belts were first mandated in vehicles in the 1968 model year. So let's walk through a couple of key points in time. Seat belts were required starting in 1968, and public education about seat belts began in the mid-60s as well. In the 14 years, from 1968 to 1982, when the conference Lifesavers started, and after millions of dollars in various public education campaigns, having been with the National Safety Council, of course, people at the Safety Council are so proud of buckle up for safety, buckle up. Some of us old enough might even remember that jingle. But after millions of dollars in today's dollars, over 8 years, actually 12 years, I'm sorry, over 12 years, seatbelt use in 1982, when the conference started, was 11%. So how is it that we spent millions of dollars and our predecessors on public education about belt use, and belt use had risen only to 11%? The early adopters, as some of us might say, the early committed safety people were wearing belts in 1982. But that first conference looked at the question, well, why did so much public education result in so little impact? And a key learning of that era, validated by research in later years, was a very simple statement: education by itself does not change behavior. Laws and enforcement of those laws are critical in changing behavior. In the 1980s, more than 30 states passed their first, mostly secondary, seatbelt laws. Combined with education and some enforcement, belt use rose in the 80s from 11% to 49%. You put a few laws in, you enforce those laws, and you quadruple safety belt use in 10 years. In the 1990s, high visibility enforcement, click it or ticket, began. And it began for safety belts and child restraints, and was later expanded to impaired driving. And enforcement was organized in a formal way, starting in one state, North Carolina, then New York, then a number of other states. And in the 1990s, belt use with laws and enforcement rose from 49% to 71%. You see a trend here? Education got us 11%, state laws got us another 30%, 38%, and then we got another significant increase with laws and active, organized enforcement. Education has been critical, of course, but state laws combined with enforcement were really the key factors that brought us from 17% and to what I would tell you is over 90% today. But remember, those 10% of people who don't wear safety belts account for more than 1/3 of fatalities. So significant progress, but a lot more work to do. Since that first conference 40 years ago, there have been numerous improvements and reductions in impaired driving. But 2 milestone laws, again, had a key impact in reducing impaired driving. the 21-year-old minimum legal drinking age in 1984, and as someone who came of age in 1973 when the state law allowed 18-year-olds to drink, I have painful memories of friends who aren't with us anymore. That 21-year-old minimum legal drinking age in 1984 and the .08 BAC law that was signed in 2000 have contributed significantly to the significant reduction in impaired driving fatalities. And with all the success that I've mentioned of laws in changing and enforcement, in changing behavior, you don't have to look very far to see that there's still today a lot of ambivalence and even opposition from legislators, some in the general public, to federal and state laws that save lives. I recall advocating about 15 years ago in a Midwestern state. I was in the legislature and I was arguing for graduated driver licensing, trying to get a passenger restriction passed in that state. The minority leader of that state at the time, who actually was a former state trooper in that state, said, "John, we're not going to pass laws in this state that tell parents how to raise their kids." That was the opposition to graduated licensing. And we still hear that kind of ambivalence and opposition to various kind of laws today. We're not going to support laws that tell people what to do. I'm sorry, should we get rid of all speed limits too? But that is a challenge that all of us have, and those of you who work in the advocacy community know that firsthand, the ambivalence or the downright opposition. Look, I can argue that we have lost thousands of young people over the years because of permissive laws. But we also know that in the Lifesavers era, significant progress has been made. When this conference began 40 years ago, nearly 10,000 young drivers and their passengers were dying in crashes every year. Now, the 21-year-old drinking age in 1984 was a big factor in reducing that. Graduated driver licensing laws over the last 20 years have played a big part of that. And that number is now approaching 2,000 per year. So you could say, well, we've had an 80% reduction over 40 years in young adult teen fatalities. But that's still far too many lives being lost. Again, significant progress, but a lot of work to do. As we think about the key contributions to success over the last 40 years, there's two other things I want to mention. The first is technology. You know, improvements in technology in vehicles have saved countless lives. Crashworthiness improvements in vehicle structures, electronic stability control, ABS brakes, ignition interlock devices. These are many technologies that have enormous impact on reducing crash rates and fatalities. And we can expect that the technological advances in the next 40 years are probably going to entirely transform transportation. I would anticipate and I would hope that 40 years from now, this conference is talking about different issues and that we have solved distractions and impairment and occupant restraints. That's certainly a goal, but it's something that is going to need continuous technology improvements as well as, of course, behavioral improvements. And we're going to hear more in a little bit from Nat Busey about the future of technology and how we're getting to a safer future. But it's going to require all of us to work together to get to zero deaths. And that's really the second key of what I want to mention is working together. As a community, we've seen our greatest gains when we work together towards the same goal, zero fatalities. And while we may have the same ultimate goal, unfortunately, We don't always agree on the best way to get there, but that's one of the values of this conference, to share the facts and research and develop strategies to save lives. You know, the history tells us something else that's very important. The 4 E's of traffic safety: engineering, education, enforcement, emergency services. They're all important to saving lives. But there's one profession on that slide. There's one profession that's part of almost every success in changing behavior, and I want to take a moment to emphasize that, and that's enforcement. The success of high visibility enforcement campaigns and increasing belt use, getting impaired drivers off the roads, tells me that the most impactful of the E's in changing behavior is enforcement and education about enforcement. The men and women of law enforcement are our partners, and today they need our support. Recent events have led to calls by some to defund law enforcement. Well, I would say the opposite is true. To effect real police reform, reform that includes the resources needed for effective and equitable traffic law enforcement, investment is needed. Like most of you, I've been privileged to interact with hundreds of men and women in blue. They're amazing people who sacrifice so much every day. You'll hear many speakers this week talk about and recognize and support law enforcement. But I want to ask you something. How much are we really supporting law enforcement when we have people talking about taking away their tools and funding they need to save lives? Let me just be straight. Without effective enforcement of impaired driving, speeding, distractions, and other risk-taking behaviors, we're not going to reach our vision of 0 fatalities. Human behavior just doesn't work that way. Let us commit that our goal to achieve 0 fatalities does not mean reductions in enforcement. As a commitment to safety is a priority for every one of us, the challenge before us to change behavior includes changing our culture regarding traffic safety and moving toward a safety culture and a safe systems approach that includes all our partners and stakeholders. These components, safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speed, safe roads, post-crash care, it can be attainable if we all work together as partners, keep the lines of communication open, and work across all disciplines. Bringing everyone to the table is crucial when we talk about safety strategies and safety programs that work. And here at Lifesavers, we have all of the E's in the room at the same time. And so hopefully you'll get an opportunity to talk about someone from another discipline and learn from them, and they can learn from you. Because bringing everybody to the table is really crucial. As we start to look to the future, and automated vehicles are introduced to our roadways, the process of identifying and mitigating risk is essential. And to do this, engineers work with roadway safety educators, traffic law enforcement, and emergency services to get the data to make informed decisions. Lifesavers has always served as a forum for the facts and evidence-based best practices. All of our work and all of our professional disciplines are critical in saving lives. At this conference, we provide a continuous feedback loop, if you will, where the hearts and minds of traffic safety professionals come together to share their knowledge and understanding. Each of us provides a piece to that puzzle to identify what works and what doesn't, to focus on what does and identify new ways. We've made a lot of progress in 40 years. But we've got a lot of challenges ahead. And I hope the next 2 days are really helpful for you so that you can make the contributions you want to make in your career. Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Nat Busey, is going to talk us through what we can look forward to in the future. Nat is the Vice President of Safety. You're going to predict the future for us, right? Nat Nat Busey is the Vice President of Safety at Aurora, a company delivering the benefits of self-driving technology safely, quickly, and broadly. His team leads the development and implementation of Aurora's approach to safety. He oversees operation, organizational, and product engineering safety, works with industry standards groups and regulatory bodies to offer guidance and support in the development of best practices and safety standards. Now, prior to Aurora, Ned led the safety team at Uber, the Advanced Technologies Group, and before working in the private sector, Nat oversaw our nation's motor vehicle safety research program, including automated vehicle research when he was with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Department of Transportation. Nat lives in Pittsburgh with his family. It's great to have him here today. Please welcome Nat Busey.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, I know it's daylight savings time, but come on. Good morning, everybody. It's so great to be here to see a lot of people that I haven't seen in a while in person, and meet some new folks. You know, one of the things that has happened, I think, to all of us is kind of the tale of two worlds. You were either stuck in your basement like I was, with your kids occasionally using you or your computer as target practice for Nerf guns, or you were out in the field. And those of you that are out in the field, truly thankful for what you were doing in very difficult times. I don't think any of us expected what happened to us. I mean, I recall when we first got the word that we might close Uber ATG, we were actually making lunch plans for the following week, thinking it was going to be like a one-week thing. And then here we are, you know, barely just coming out of it. So what I thought I'd do today, particularly in light of all of us getting together really for the first time, is sort of just give my reflection over the last 2.5 decades and maybe a glimpse of where we're going, particularly from the vehicle side. If there's one thing I've noticed is we actually need to do a better job bridging the gap between what we traditionally call kind of the vehicle side of the house and the behavioral side of the house. Where we're going, that separation becomes pretty meaningless if all the promises of the technology hold true. We have a long way to get there, but it's really important for us to really start understanding that there are needs on both sides of this proverbial house, and they have to work together, to what John was saying. Like this thing that we're trying to do as a society to really try to eliminate the tremendous toll of fatalities and injuries and crashes on our nation's highways is a big deal. You know, I think one of the things I might postulate is that Americans have become very numb to traffic safety. It's sort of considered as a matter of course of doing business that fatalities are actually expected. I hear my kids talk about it, that they actually expect one of their friends to be killed or injured in a vehicle crash. And that pains me as a safety professional who's been in this field for a very long time. So we have to change kind of people's public sentiment around this. So you guys know the numbers better than me. And so I'm not here to tell you that we are seeing numbers that we haven't seen in 15 years, because you guys all know that. To me, I put this in here actually for a different purpose. And I purposely put these two words on the top to sort of, as this commander said over there, reinvigorate us. I might argue that we've actually been in this state for a very long time. Yes, we're all like nervous about what has happened in the last 2 years, but if you look at these trend charts, we were actually really not doing that good before the pandemic. I remember in days at NHTSA where we would have these long meetings. I mean, Marilena might remember, are we going to commit to 1.2? Is that a good goal to get to? And everybody's running around with hair on fire thinking like there's no way we'll get there. In fact, we did get there, but then we're kind of going in the wrong direction. I mean, if you look at the rate, it came down really good there for a decade or so, and then kind of stagnated. Even though we were making progress on kind of overall fatalities, the rate sort of got stuck. Injuries is even more dramatic. I mean, we were doing really good on injuries, and then also kind of got stuck. If you look at kind of what was going on with speeding and alcohol, it's been a third of the fatalities for a very long long time. Despite all of our efforts on .08, despite all of the enforcement, we actually were stuck. There's a segment of the population that we're clearly not reaching. And when you look at it just kind of in a kind of decade by decade comparison, you see that we've made decent progress on the light vehicle side. You see that we kind of have been staying steady on the large truck side, something I care about and I'll talk about in a second. But the two areas that kind of jumped out to me when I was putting this together is what was going on with pedestrians. We seem to have forgotten that there are these human beings walking on the sidewalks and streets. We have forgot about them. We weren't doing very much to encourage safer design around vehicles for pedestrians. We certainly weren't doing anything on the infrastructure side. And yet, we seem surprised to see pedestrians sticking out in the fatality picture, and by considerable percentages. So that's concerning because on the vehicle side, if we need to do anything, well, that's a long time. It takes a long time to change infrastructure. Maybe we can do something now with the infrastructure bill and things like that, but it takes a long time to do this. And I might argue another reason is some of the pedestrian fatalities we're seeing is actually an equity issue, where you see communities being built actually without sidewalks. Where I live in Pittsburgh, it is very much a drive first, walk in the woods kind of thing. Sidewalks are in the city, but nowhere else. And so, my kids ride on the road. They walk on the road. Clearly not good. Bigger vehicles, higher speeds, kind of a toxic mix. And so maybe shifting a little bit to technology. As John mentioned, technology deserves a part of this conversation. But there's a couple things we should kind of just keep in the front of our mind. So if you look at things that we take for granted in motor vehicles today, seatbelts, ESC, 18 airbags in your vehicle if you're lucky, and rear visibility. So I worked on ESC, actually frontal airbags, ESC, side airbags, and rear vis at my time at NHTSA. And in the moment, you're working on it, you're trying to make the cost benefit work, you're trying to figure out how many lives you're going to save because that's how you do rulemaking. But one of the things that gets lost in all of that is time. So if you look at every single one of these technologies, by the time they were introduced, let's say, into a vehicle, to the time that, as a society, we decided to regulate it, it's like a 15-year gap, give or take. 15 years. That's not to say the rulemaking took that long. It's to say that's how long it generally takes to kind of get the numbers that you need, the test procedures, the performance criteria, all the things that you need to get a rule through the system. And I didn't even put on here like the phase-in period, which is another thing. After you do the rule, then people get a certain amount of time to actually meet the rule, which, because you can't sell a vehicle in the United States if you don't meet it. And so that's a long time, a really long time. I think the other thing that's important here is when I look at this timeline, and this is no offense to my colleagues at NHTSA, it's been a long time since we did a big major rule that actually had huge lives to save to it. I might argue ESC was probably the last one that we did that with. So we're due. Maybe something like AEB is around the corner that will have, I think, pretty big benefits. But what comes after that, right? Because again, we're talking 10, 15-year spread. One other thing to point out here is that it generally takes about 20 to 25 years, at least according to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, for a single piece of technology to penetrate the fleet. So you couple that stat with supply chain crisis, a car park that's actually getting older, vehicles are more expensive. The impact of the pandemic and all the work that we all have to do, plus how these new technologies will enter the fleet, is actually now shifted. It's shifted to the right. So maybe now, rather than 15 years, maybe now it's more like 20 years. And we need to understand that because we only have so many tools in the toolbox. So there's bully pulpit. You can get an administrator, secretary of transportation, to speak fire and brimstone and tell us do this, that, and the other thing. That's a way. That has worked. We can do guidance, particularly guidance from the federal government is super helpful, but it's just guidance. We can do voluntary agreements. I've been fortunate enough to lead a couple of those, and they do work. You get industry together, they agree to some things, and they can move a whole lot quicker than regulation. And maybe the thing they agree to actually becomes the regulation. You have consumer information, a very important topic. Last week, NHTSA announced that it was going to update the new car assessment program, but it's not just them. There's consumer reports, there's IHS, there's all these consumer metrics that we'll call it traditional vehicle manufacturers pay attention to that has been shown to move the needle. And then I talked about regulation. But outside of that, that's about it. And all of these things have their different windows of opportunity. So it's not this panacea where we can just say, let's go grab that piece of technology, we're going to regulate it, and our problem is solved, right? It's certainly part of the equation, but it's not the only piece. So where are we going with all of this stuff? Why did I just go through all that? Because in my kind of simple view of the world, we have sort of like 3 buckets of technology. You sort of have what we're used to working with, I'll call it. Single function technologies that we can identify a problem in the field. We come up with a technology to address it. We write some performance criteria. Some of us get a lot of gray hair working it through the rulemaking system, and it works. We can point to it. As John pointed out, we can point to how many lives have been saved by seatbelts. We can point to how many lives have been saved by ESC. I suspect AEB and alcohol detection will be able to point to how many lives we can save. That's one category of tech. The next category of tech is what I would call kind of consumer feature tech. And this is really what I mentioned before about the blending of behavioral and vehicle safety, where this conference will have to change. So we have all these technologies out here coming onto vehicles that I would argue are more consumer convenience features, technologies that make the driving task easier. I happen to have some of these technologies on my vehicle. They're great. Traffic jam assist, it's a great thing. Luckily, since moving to Pittsburgh, I haven't actually had to use it very much, but when I was in DC, definitely appreciated traffic jam assist. And so it's a technology that basically allows the driver to kind of have less workload. You're still supposed to be eyes on the road, you're still supposed to be paying attention and steering and things like that, but the vehicle kind of modulates the speed. If you have more advanced system, they actually can help nudge you a little bit. But those bring on a whole host of basic human factors issues. Human beings generally are really poor at monitoring autonomy, really poor. And so we got to do some work there. And it's not just relying on driver monitoring to fix it. There's a lot of basic human factors work that needs to continue as these types of technologies continue to get into the fleet and as they continue to proliferate. Because the simple issue is, once you have some of those other technologies that I mentioned on the previous slide, you actually can do these other technologies a little bit easier. And then the last one I'll spend most of the rest of the talk talking about is self-driving. And I would actually put this in the category of emerging. A lot of people like to say self-driving technology isn't available for sale in the United States, da-da-da-da. For sure, it's true. But that's not the model. The model is not to sell self-driving to a bunch of people. The model is it's a fleet-operated technology, maybe operated by an Uber, maybe operated by a Walmart, maybe operated by a FedEx, maybe operated by an Amazon. These are much different use cases for self-driving technology. And yes, maybe some OEMs might come out with some version that they think they can make cheaply enough that someone would actually pay for it. But in essence, we're already there. You see Neuro, a company that's delivering food to food deserts, operating out with anybody in the vehicle. You see Waymo and Cruise, 2 of our competitors, with nobody in the driver's seat giving rides, having basically incident-free runs. And then there's what Aurora is working on, which is trucks, Class 8 tractor trailers to be specific, and automating that driving task, something that makes a lot of sense if you look at how freight is moved in the country, and if you look at some of the pain points of quality of life that some of these truck drivers actually have. And so it's here. It's not some future thing. It's actually here today, and it will start coming out over the next coming years. And I think what we have to wrap our minds around is this is not a technology that you go to the dealership in the 17 million or so new cars that are sold every year in a good year and expect you're going to see it. It's going to be very isolated in different parts of the country because that's where the business makes sense. That's where the operational design makes sense, meaning like less weather issues or less complicated traffic environment, which is fundamentally different from where we've been. And so we need to understand, though, that all three of these will coexist, maybe forever, but at least for the foreseeable future. And so how we think about these technologies from a traffic safety perspective is super important. And so for me, it's really about making it a reality. So let me talk about a couple of headwinds. One is we have a situation where the states in particular are very excited about the technology in some cases. In some cases like Pennsylvania, they're sort of getting there, but in California, it's like flat out prohibition. We can't deploy a driverless Class 8 tractor trailer in California at the moment. And so we need, in the theme of working together, the federal government and states to work together if we're really gonna realize this vision of zero fatalities, because in my view of the world, it's not like automated vehicles are gonna solve everything, given what I just told you about what is likely the natural progression, but they're gonna be a key enabler for sure. And we would be foolish, given the kind of crisis that we're in on our nation's roadway, not to take advantage of it. Should be all tools on the table. And one of the things that happens is, the leadership from the federal government can do a lot of things. It's not just about rulemaking. It's also about its convening power and bringing people together and really figuring out who has what with respect to whether it's safety, who has what with respect to policy, because it's really not one or the other. All of those things have to coexist. And so the current environment is super challenging. My team spends a lot of time, of course, working on the safety aspects. How do we think about what we need to know in a given operational design domain and all those kind of things. But we actually have a very skeptical and confused public. And I might argue this is not surprising. Even if you look at basic things like terminology, everybody's trying to be helpful, but nobody's talking to each other. So you have 4 or 5 different groups coming out with different ways to explain the same piece of tech. And yet we expect the public not to be confused. That doesn't seem like a good recipe to me. But yet we're still pushing hard to try to get this technology out there, and this is one of the biggest barriers. It's not the engineering, believe me, we'll solve that piece. But it's really the public aspect piece and the public policy piece, because there's this notion that we will have automated vehicles with zero fatalities and life will go on. Well, when you look at trucking, for example, almost 60% of the crashes in heavy trucks is actually caused by light vehicles crashing into the heavy truck, either in the back, in the side, jumping up in front of the vehicle. It obviously makes our job harder because we want to guard against those. But this notion that we're going to be able to introduce this technology into the market and have zero fatalities doesn't mesh with the reality of the situation on the roads, no matter how good we make the Aurora Driver. And so this is really important, because that, coupled with the public confusion, could really set back this technology for a time that we would actually never be able to realize it if we're not careful. I talked a little bit about the kind of the rulemaking process and the standards, and right now that's one of the main things I hear from our state partners is like, well, we need NHTSA or somebody to make some rules so we know that they're watching safety, not realizing that NHTSA is always watching safety, right? They have a huge enforcement arm that definitely carries a big stick. But then people are looking for kind of performance requirements. And so if you go back to the slide a couple of times ago where that lag between technology introduction and requirements, like 15 years. So if that's what we're going to hang our hat on, we're going to be here for a minute. On the right side, there's kind of these really other different things around how do we change and kind of make things more easier for the public to understand. So one thing we can do is actually work on industry standards, and we are. 5 years ago, you could argue maybe there was only a handful, like 3 standards that someone could say apply to self-driving or apply to automated vehicles, and now that number is more like 15 or 20, has ballooned, which is great. That's to tell you how complicated the problem really is. But we as an industry actually need to start telling people that we're actually following these standards and that we're using them. The other thing that is going to be very helpful is guidance from the states and the feds. What are you actually looking for? So we can have a conversation and figure out how to work our way through that. But it all starts with transparency and collaboration. And so one of the things that we've done at Aurora is come out with this framework called a safety case. And it's really our way to show our work. We're not saying, trust us, that we'll be able to deploy this technology safely, and we're not going to tell you what that means. We've actually put together a framework that allows people, whomever those people are, regulators, the public, media, to ask very specific questions on very specific aspects of safety. Because the way we view safety is it's a holistic view of safety. It's not just about the tech, it's really about the organization, it's about our operations, and it's about the tech. All three of those things actually have to work together for us to be able to deliver on the promise of a self-driving future with the Aurora Driver kind of in its place to really make sure that it's working like it's supposed to. Particularly, again, this is not like we'll build it once and then it's all over the United States. It's a very progressive deployment across different ODDs. So like, yeah, we may not be able to handle snow today, but guess what? We're not going into the snow. These are things that we can solve over time and still be able to deliver the benefits of the technology and realize kind of safety at its core on the American roads. And so here it is. It looks very simple, simple phrase. Our vehicle is acceptably safe to be on public roads. And everyone's always asked, what do you mean by acceptable? Well, it comes down to these 5 principles. That's what it means to be acceptable. It means, is the vehicle proficient, right? In the ODD that we're going into, do we actually really understand it? Have we developed the right tests to know those are what's in the operational design domain? Have we handled all of the behavior aspects? If there are stop signs in our ODD, do we know how to use all the stop signs that are in that particular ODD? If we can't handle particular types of weather, do we know when we exit that? That's all part of proficiency. Those are all the questions that the engineers, plus what I would argue are other pieces of the company, like even our people operations, the lawyers, the government affairs, everybody in the company has claims that they must satisfy in order to close this safety case. The other one, fail safe, right? So we did everything that we thought we should do, something still goes wrong. Plastic bag flies off the road, covers the LiDAR, we can't see, right? We gotta be able to detect that, right? We gotta be able to get to a safe place, either on the side of the road or, if worst case, stop in lane, right? If we're in the middle of a construction zone and there is no lane to pull off to, and a plastic bag gets thrown over the LiDAR, I'm pretty sure people don't want us to keep driving down the lane without being able to see. And this is not some conversation around, oh, then you should have multiple modalities, because you can have multiple modalities and you still have the same types of issues you have to worry about. Continuous improving. Are we learning from what's happening in the field, right? Are we taking that information, feeding it back in? You know, a safety case in our mind isn't like a static thing like we do with rules where you pass the test and check the box, you're done. Ours is what we call a living safety case. So it's always changing. New pieces of evidence come in. You know, the software engineers have changed something, right? We need to make sure that that safety case is updated to include that. Resilient. You know, some hacker comes in from some far-off nation state. Yeah, we got to be able to detect that and guard against that. You know, are we resilient to things that are definitely foreseeable and trustworthy? You know, this is kind of a little bit kind of soft because it's like, well, how do you measure trustworthy? Well, there are ways to measure it. It's how you behave as a company. Are you talking to the right stakeholders? Are you sharing your work? Are you being open about things that are happening, the challenge that you have, and more specifically, what can your technology do or not do? So again, we've basically engineered this into the company in a way that allows us to collect the information from all the different teams and actually be able to satisfy that, yes, at the end of the day, if we have all of that evidence, we can meet that claim at the top that we're acceptably safe to be on public roads. So notice I didn't say it's about X times safer than a human driver, or we're going to reduce fatalities by 30%. That has nothing to do with how you develop a self-driving vehicle. This is how you do it. This is how you know when you make a change in somewhere that how does it affect your top-level claim, and we firmly believe it's the only way you can get to scale. So with that, thank you for your time. I look forward to interacting with so many of my former colleagues and happy to chat. But thanks again for having me, and have a wonderful conference.
Thank you, Nat. You know, it was, I don't know about you, but earlier this morning when Colonel McGreal was naming off the law enforcement folks that had died just in the last couple of years. It's just heartbreaking. Here are folks that are working so hard for us, to protect us, and they lose their life in that role. Today with us is someone who's going to speak about that, Keith Dorwart. Keith is a special agent with Zone 4, the Major Crimes Division of the Illinois State Police. So he's lost colleagues that he's worked with, but he has also lost his father. He's a surviving son of Morgan County Sheriff Deputy Craig Dorwart. Keith lost his father in 1994, and he now serves as president of the Illinois chapter of Concerns of Police Survivors. And as a part of the Illinois State Police Memorial Team and Illinois Cops Critical Incident Memorial Team, he's assisted local agencies and the Illinois State Police following line of duty deaths. For our mission moment today, please welcome Special Agent Keith Dorwart.
Thanks, sir. I know everybody else has stood still. I'm not that person. I hope everybody can bear with me. As they said, I'm Special Agent Keith Dorwart with the Illinois State Police, located out of Springfield. You may be thinking, why this person for this conference? And maybe the introduction gave it away. But I don't work on the interstate next to it at all. The only time is if I'm going to a major case, a homicide, a sex assault, internet crimes against children investigation. That's my day-to-day. But just like all of you in the room, I'm a stakeholder of the roadway, of our community, because we're all out there. It doesn't matter if we're all doing the right thing, if we're not spreading that message, if we're not enforcing those rules, if we're not moving this message forward, it's not safe for us to be driving. It's not safe for our families to be driving. This conference, this idea, these goals, they affect all of us on a day-to-day basis, whether we're enforcing the law, setting the standards, setting the goals, or implementing policy change. We are all stakeholders in it. And on that point, I got to talk about my family. My fiance Jocelyn, my son Emmett, my daughter Hadley. This is hat number 1. State Trooper 101, if you can't talk about your hat in a speech, you're not doing your speech right. So hat number 1 at home, that's me. I'm dad at home. And getting home safely, that's what we build into at the academy. We can take care of ourselves, but we have to take care of the motoring public as well and each other. My story on road safety starts well before today, though. My father was a Morgan County deputy. He was actually assigned to Zone 4 Springfield with the Central Illinois Enforcement Group, SIG. It's a drug unit, still is today. Work out of the same office as me. Morgan County is Jacksonville, Illinois, nearby Springfield, just for those of you not from here. On the day my dad died, he came home for dinner with us, me and my mom. We had dinner. He left. 1994. We've heard the history and the progress of laws. 94 was a different time. Freak snowstorm in April. Driving about 20 minutes away to Jacksonville. Him and another car hit head on. Snow. Terrible visibility, to the point that my grandfather was the volunteer fire chief at the time. One of my uncles, for lack of a better word, great family friend, was the police officer in Waverly. The responding officers and fire department couldn't tell you where in a 6-mile stretch where my dad's crash even happened. My dad was killed instantly. The other driver survived the crash for a little bit. She actually ended up donating her organs and passing a couple days after that. 1994. My dad had just left home. He forgot his notes, his phone number, so he's on his cell phone, 94 cell phone. There's enough there. Bad weather, no seatbelt. We're cops. Those of you in law enforcement, we all know at least a couple cops that don't wear their seatbelts on a regular basis or came up through training. You don't need that. You got too much to do. You need to get out of your car fast, right? Drug cop through and through. They'll tell you they probably don't wear their seatbelts still today a lot of the time. So Dad actually is on the phone with me, not wearing a seatbelt, driving in terrible weather. Him and the other car hit head on. Not in my slideshow, but listening this morning, I'd be remiss to not mention my cousin Derek was killed in a drunk driving incident as well on a college campus, passenger. These crashes, fatalities, safety, whether we do everything right is only one part of this, because everybody has to do the right things for a safe roadway. Hat number 2, my law enforcement career. I graduated University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. Couldn't find a job in Illinois, so found a new home, Knoxville, Tennessee. Start out down there, and the training I got was, you better not talk like a Yankee down here, you're gonna get punched in the face first day out on the road. Anybody from the South can understand that. I quickly learned how to talk. I quickly learned how to adapt to my environment and reach people where they're at. The inadvertent violator, the person that doesn't understand why you're having that conversation, maybe not because they don't want to, that's not the way they were raised, or that's not the environment they're from, or maybe they were raised the exact opposite, that that's not an important factor. We have to meet people where they're at, with the enforcement, with the education, with the conversation. Spent about 4 years in Knoxville. I stayed away from the interstate. That place is scary. I'd rather be in any other place. I'll be in a project. I'll be in a building. I don't care. I didn't touch the interstates down there. When the opportunity came up to come home to the Illinois State Police, I knew that was where I needed to be. Go to the academy. At that time, our placement in the state police was based on rank in the class. It's top 15 in my class, and my only goal was not to end up in Chicago. Nothing against Chicago, but I'm from downstate, and I didn't need that experience in my life. So I ended up in Joliet, because it's not Chicago, but it's right next door. And I got a quick taste of suburb traffic, heavy traffic, and I grew a thankfulness for IDOT that I never knew I would have, and fire equipment. There's nothing you can compare to being on the side of an interstate and having that mirror clipped or buzzed off. There's nothing you can put into words the thankfulness you have to know that IDOT truck is coming to back you up, or that fire truck is coming to back you up, because it doesn't take much to destroy one of our cars. And Trooper Frank is a perfect example. He actually was in District 5 when I started there. We're all in this together. We're all stakeholders in this going forward and keeping each other safe. My career moves forward from District 5. I end up back down in Champaign, go to the investigations, and then transfer back to Springfield, where I'm originally from. Hat number 3. Concerns of police survivors in Illinois, concerns of police survivors. National organization and on the state level, we take care of the families falling line of duty death. It doesn't matter if it's felonious, if it's accidental, if it's COVID. Our mission is to take care of those left behind falling a line of duty death. Our group here in Illinois will have a spot out after here. You can meet our vice president, Debbie Wiseman. Her brother was an Iowa State patrolman, and he was killed in a traffic crash as well. So to say that this is close to both of us is an understatement. We also have a bicycle ride that goes from Alton, Illinois to Chicago. So if you ever want to take a bicycle ride across the great state of Illinois, it's about 400 miles. We raise thousands and thousands of dollars to send our families and take care of our families to all types of programs. All those hats kind of come into line with these three. November of 2018, starting out my career in the Illinois State Police, I go to a conference on safety, wellness, put on by Concerns of Police Survivors. And I'm talking to a captain at the time. He's like, hey, if we have a line of duty death, would you be interested in helping us out and helping the families out? I'm like, whatever you need, sir. It's always a good answer when the captain or colonel or anybody like that's asking you, right? Whatever you need. So November of 2018, we hit January 2019. Trooper Lambert's killed in a Scots law violation, assisting a motorist on the interstate. We followed that up with another line of duty death in McHenry County in the beginning of March. Trooper Jones Story and Trooper Ellis at the end of March. This group is the wheels behind making sure those names that could be in the future aren't added to the wall that these names are already on. That Illinois Memorial we just had to expand because of the amount of line of duty deaths, and it's only growing. The National Memorial, we're still trying to figure out how you grow it because they never thought we'd actually fill it up, and here we are. Some things aren't preventable. People are crazy. People do dumb things, but some things are controllable. And I truly believe that this group sitting here in this room are the wheels that make those changes, that make our jobs safer, that make it safer for that tow truck driver on the side of the interstate, that IDOT worker improving the roads that's in danger, and officers like the three you see pictured here, along with Trooper Hannikin, who died in the line of duty here recently, and Trooper Frank, who was injured and is still putting up the fight. What's next? What's next is you guys. You guys make the change. You guys set the standard. The conversations here, the conferences, the meetings that you guys go to, just sitting around the table are the ones that make the impact. Don't discount what you can do sitting around a table, having a meal, socializing. Those are when things, truly, ideas flourish. And I know you guys are going to take advantage of this great conference that they're putting on. So thank you all for being here, and stay safe.
Thank you, Keith. We're truly sorry for your loss, but thank you for your leadership, your passion, and your dedication to supporting the families of those officers who lost their lives. We are truly honored today to have one more speaker with us, by video actually. Secretary Pete Buttigieg is the 19th Secretary of Transportation, having been sworn in just a little over a year ago. As you all probably know, Mayor Pete served 2 terms as the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. He's a graduate of Harvard and a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, and he also served for 7 years as an officer in the U.S. Navy Reserve. And while he was the mayor of South Bend, he took a leave of absence for a deployment to Afghanistan. He couldn't be with us today, but he sent a greeting. So please, a message from Secretary Pete.
Thank you, Chair Olszewski, for that introduction. And thank you to Lifesavers for inviting me to speak with you today. I also want to say a special thank you and congratulations to this year's NHTSA Public Service Award winners who have done such vital work to keep the traveling public safe. I know this year's conference is coming at an especially urgent time for all of us who work in and around transportation safety. The most recent FARS data from earlier this month confirmed that deaths on America's roadways are on the rise. 38,824 people lost their lives on our roads in 2020, and many more were injured. Deaths among people who walk and bike are up, and people of color and low-income communities are the hardest hit. This is a national crisis. Behind every one of those numbers is a person whose life has been cut short, whose family has been shattered. We cannot and must not ever accept these tragic deaths as somehow inevitable. They're preventable. And that fact is a cause for hope and a call to action, because by working together, we can all do something about it. This January, we launched the National Roadway Safety Strategy, a comprehensive plan to significantly reduce injuries and deaths on our roadways, with the ultimate goal of getting that number down to 0. That strategy is rooted in a safe system approach with multiple layers of protection: safer roads, safer people, safer vehicles, safer speeds, and better post-crash care. People are always going to make mistakes, but in a well-designed system, human fallibility shouldn't have to lead to human fatalities. We also have great cause for hope thanks to the President's bipartisan infrastructure law, which so many of you helped to champion. This law creates a Safe Streets and Roads for All program with $6 billion to help cities and towns deliver new, comprehensive safety strategies. It also includes funding for the Highway Safety Improvement Program, increasing it by nearly $4 billion over previous levels. At DOT, we are using every tool in our arsenal to meet this moment, from important proposed changes to our new car assessment program, to our upcoming update to the manual on uniform traffic control devices. And through our grant programs, we have supported local safety plans tailored to communities, whether that means building a well-lit crosswalk, adding a pedestrian walkway over a bridge, or installing a new roundabout. But one of the things that makes me most hopeful is you and your work. Thanks to you, the safety advocates, transportation planners, first responders, and more, we're continually working to keep our streets safe. You are the driving force behind new solutions, raising public awareness, organizing, advocating, and demanding action. It's you who remind us of the people behind the numbers, and that the only acceptable number when it comes to traffic deaths is 0. And it's going to take work from all of us to achieve that goal. The very name of this gathering, Lifesavers, underscores the importance of the work we've been called to do. So many of the moral and religious traditions around the world speak about how saving a life is like saving humanity itself. That's what all of you are working to do, so thank you once again. We stand with you, and we're ready for the important work ahead.
Thank you to Secretary Pete for his leadership and passion. You know, as we started this morning, I asked any of you were here 40 years ago, and there were a few. I wonder how many of us will be here 40 years from now. Well, I'll tell you, the youngest among us might be, right? And as we aim for a future with safer roads and stronger communities, we have to look to those who follow us, to our youth, those who will take our place to lead traffic safety and to build a better and safer world. And I'm pleased to announce that today we have 42 new young professionals joining our ranks, the 2022 Lifesavers Traffic Safety Scholars. Please stand. All the safety scholars, please stand. Thank you for being here. They come from a variety of different backgrounds and schools and countries, and they are the future, part of the future of traffic safety. Thank you so much. You know, I met with them yesterday, and I have to tell you, I'm excited. I'm always excited about the next generation and the young folks following us. And so when you see a scholar, and they'll have a traffic safety scholar on their badge, when you see a scholar, greet them. They would be very interested in what you do and how you make an impact because, as I said, they come up from a variety of backgrounds and are assimilating themselves into our community and please welcome them openly and share your knowledge, and they'll share theirs. The other thing I would ask you to do, if you haven't already done so, is download the Lifesavers app. It gives you access to the complete conference program. It provides event alerts and an opportunity for you to evaluate the workshops very easily directly from your device. And your feedback guides the planning process, so take a minute after each workshop you attend to tell us what you did. And I also encourage you to tweet. Those of you who are tweeters, tweet about your experience using the hashtag Lifesavers22. I hope you all have a great conference. The first workshop begins promptly at 10:30. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for all you do to save lives. I hope you have a great conference. Thank you.
It never really was. She had a place in his life. He never made her think twice. As she rises to her apology, anybody else would surely know. He's watching her go. What a fool believes he sees. The wise man has the power to reason away what she